Hey everybody, it's Cam from the Nerd Book Review. Today I'll be reviewing Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman. I actually listened to the entirety of this book on audiobook. Jeff Hayes is the narrator. He did a wonderful job, does all the different voices, just amazing. I absolutely recommend going with the audiobooks on this one. I've heard from a whole bunch of people that that's their preferred way to consume this. These books are a phenomenon. I just was reading an article that was in like the beginning of 2023. Over 400,000 copies of this book had been sold through all the formats. I believe that last year sometime the TV rights were sold, and there's supposed to also be a comic book series. I really feel like this will probably be a good comic book series as well. Just huge. They are self-published, came out on Amazon. And just huge. I'm not a LitRPG fan as a general rule. I don't really care for the setting, the way they're set up. They're usually like a group of young adventurers. A lot of them will be like, say, they're elites or whatever, and they're going to go through these dungeons that happen to be, for some reason, set up in their world where you go and you get good loot and become adventurers. It's just not my thing as a general rule. I have enjoyed several progression fantasies in the last year. I really loved Kraken Rider Z by Dirk Ashton. It was on my Books of the Year list last year. And I enjoyed Alec Hudson's progression fantasy as well. But generally, LitRPG is a step too far for me. It was not the case here. I know that I said I was going to, break things down, make sure that I had the deal where you could see when the bad, the good, and my final thoughts start. But this book was just sheer insanity, and I don't think I'm going to bother splitting this episode up the way I normally do. I am going to read the book blurb because I think it really helps set things up. It gives all of the plot, device, world building, everything that you need. And then from there on out, I'm just going to talk about the absurdity of it. The apocalypse will be televised. A man, his ex-girlfriend's cat. A sadistic game show unlike anything in the universe. A dungeon crawl where survival depends on killing your prey in the most entertaining way possible. In a flash, every human-erected construction on Earth, from Buckingham Palace to the tiniest of sheds, collapses in a heap, sinking into the ground. The buildings and all the people inside have all been atomized and transformed into the dungeon. An 18-level labyrinth filled with traps, monsters, and loot. A dungeon so enormous it circles the entire globe. Only a few dare venture inside, but once you're in, you can't get out. And what's worse, each level has a time limit. You have but days to find a staircase to the next level down, or it's game over. In this game, it's not about your strength or your dexterity, it's about your followers, your views, your clout. It's about building an audience and killing those goblins with style. You can't just survive here, you gotta survive big. You gotta fight with vigor, with excitement. You gotta make them stand up and cheer. And if you do have that it factor, you may just find yourself with a following. That's the only way to truly survive in this game, with the help of the loot boxes dropped upon you by the generous benefactors watching from across the galaxy. They call it Dungeon Crawler World, but for Carl, it's anything but a game. That pretty much explains things. This is a lit RPG where basically the whole premise is, think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the Earth is about to be destroyed. Paperwork was filed at the galactic offices sometime in the past, and since humans even now are not spacefaring, we were not able to file our counterclaim for ownership of the planet. And so because of that, the aliens have a right to take all of the resources on planet Earth, and those resources include humanity. Now, the kind of whole premise is that there are ancient races. There's like 7 or 9, I can't remember the exact number right now, but different races that are seated on different worlds. Then eventually those worlds can be called in on one of the galactic companies who can do different things with the planet, whatever they want. In this case, the people who seeded our planet and who made their claim sometime during the Egyptian era of the pharaohs. Obviously, we weren't unable to counterclaim. We had 50 years to do so, didn't do it. So now they've finally gotten around to harvesting earth. And their preferred method of making money and harvesting earth is to have this giant dungeon crawler game. Right off the bat, everyone, as mentioned in the book blurb, got flattened. I don't know exactly how many people, were outside and initially survived, but about 14 million people will actually go into the dungeon. Basically, like in your head, like you're playing an RPG game, the words and heads-up display and all that stuff came up and said that you can go into the dungeon, try to survive. There's 18 levels. If you make it to the 18th level and actually survive and beat the level, then you would become in charge of the earth. But it's important to note, we find out pretty quick that no one's ever come close to making it to the 18th level. I don't think that anyone's ever even tried. So because of that, we know that it's going to be a dangerous thing. So Carl, our main character, he's outside because this asshole of a cat, his ex-girlfriend's cat, he just found out she's cheating on him like a couple days before that. He was going to move, and the cat gets outside, and the cat's name is Princess Donut. It's important. She's a very, very pretty show cat. She really early on ends up getting this like epic loot box that actually makes her sentient, so she's not just a pet. She's actually a dungeon crawler and goes along and is Carl's companion. This basically, think of like the way this thing whole set up is like if you've ever played like World of Warcraft or any of those things, right? You get loot boxes, you go through dungeons, you fight things, and you get you get better loot, you get better stats. It's set up just like you would think. Just like any other RPG. Now, why do I like this one, though, when I generally don't like them? I think that it's the premise and the way it's set up, right? Carl only goes into this dungeon because he has to, right? Earth has basically been destroyed. It's like -2 degrees the night that it happens. It's like 2:30 in the morning, and he's just trying to get this cat out. A running joke throughout the entire book is that he was just wearing a jacket, a pair of boxers, and Crocs. So he goes into the dungeon. He doesn't have pants. He's just wearing boxers, and he's also not wearing shoes. So that's how he starts things off, right? And it ends up being like a running joke the whole time that he doesn't have pants or he doesn't have shoes. He ends up having a lot of skills that involve fighting with his feet. So eventually it'll get to a point where if he decided to wear boots or decided to wear pants, it would actually drop his stats, and it's really hilarious. The AI that's always speaking to him in the while he's in the dungeon has a foot fetish, and it gets real creepy with it. It's kind of hilarious. But just all in all, I just felt like this book was just so crazy and entertaining. And I think that whole, like, he has to go into the dungeon, so do, whatever the 14 million people that actually go in there. They don't really have a choice, right? I think that's what made it so different for me and why I enjoyed it in a way that I don't enjoy a lot of other ones. Like, I don't really care that you decided to become an adventurer and, go to the dungeon in whatever world you're in, right? Most of the time, it doesn't matter. You just are a normal person. Well, in this case, you're probably going to die if you didn't go into the dungeon. Carl is not exactly an enthusiastic participant. I do love that Princess Donut. She's pretty ridiculous. Like, she's got that personality that she is a princess, that she's been a show cat for all these years, and she just thinks that she's special. She loves going and doing like shows and playing up for the audience. And Carl's catchphrase ends up being "God damn it, Donut," because he's always upset and irritated with her for all the ridiculous things that she does. As mentioned in the book blurb, it's not just important that you go through the dungeon and you kill all the creatures that you're supposed to kill. It's also important that you do it in style, because people all over the galaxy are watching this show, right? This is like the must-see TV for the entire rest of the galaxy. If you really want to get like the best loot and the best things, you're not going to get that necessarily just from random things you would pick up off of mobs like you would in a video game. You need to get benefactors to give you those things. So going on one of the talk shows or the other things in between levels that you get pulled out of the game to go speak to other people. Those are the kind of things that you want to really play up and get followers. You can only have so many people who favorite you as the person they're going to follow. And so because of that, right, you have a limited amount. So you need to do everything that you do like spectacularly and impressively. And Carl definitely doesn't care nearly as much about that, but Princess Donut really does and kind of drags Carl along with him through those things. I think a big part of why I enjoyed it too was just the sheer absurdity of it. I mean, it is ridiculous. At one point, Carl... they're getting ready to fight a neighborhood boss, and they're like kind of like little tiny goblins. And Carl has found a big stash of dynamite and explosives, and they toss in the explosives into the room and then shut the door, and there's just a huge explosion. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of achievements start to be read out to Carl. And this is another reason why I think the audiobooks are so awesome, because you really get to hear that thing like you would like in a video game at times, right, where they're reading him off. And he ends up apparently killing a whole bunch of like goblin children who are in there with the neighborhood boss. Who knows why the children are being stashed there? I guess they're safer that way. But among the other things is like, you monster, you killed dozens of children. I mean, there's just all kinds of ridiculous things and ridiculous achievements, right? The whole thing is just, it's absurd. But in addition to being like hilarious and absurd, there's also those moments that really bring things down and you see like Carl having like moments where he's just like, this is ridiculous, right? Or like that he's in danger of being emotionally overwhelmed. You sometimes will meet some of the other dungeon crawlers, and some of those scenarios are pretty awful, and we do see humanity at the same time. And so there's always those moments of gravity to go along with all of the absurdity of what we're seeing. All in all, though, this book is just, it's a ton of fun. It is just, there's a ton of action. It's basically nonstop. Obviously, if you like to play role-playing games, then this is the kind of thing that you're going to like. I think if you're a LitRPG fan in general, obviously a lot of people have read these books, 400,000 copies sold. That's, it's pretty big. So they are a phenomenon, and I can see why they are a phenomenon. Now, in terms of like what am I going to rate this book? As awesome as it is, and as much as I've talked about it, I think I'm going to go with a 9.5 instead of that pure 10 out of 10. I don't think this is quite going to be able to be on that book of the year list for one reason, and I think that that's because of the style. I don't know that for me, it's got a ton of rereadability, and I think that that's the kind of thing that I often think about when I am putting a book on the my book of the year list. I think of those little tiny things like, all these scenarios are fun. It's exciting to see how he's going to beat some of these world bosses, because there's some real craziness, right? Like there'll be a mix up of fantasy creatures plus people. He fights one like she's like a Karen type creature with a whole bunch of arms. She has been she's like in charge of like these group of fairies who are basically running a multi-level marketing scheme with it, of like a basically like moonshine that's like highly explosive. There's just all kinds of, there's a bag lady that he fights, that's kind of one of those first times where we have a real absurdity, but also some gravity to a situation, right? Because he feels awful as he's killing what kind of looks like a giant homeless woman. But so a lot of that is the surprise and wondering like what crazy thing he's going to do to actually beat those bosses. So that first time around where you're wondering what's going to happen, that's like a big part of the joy that I had while reading this book. And I don't know that I would feel that same level of joy on a reread. So I think that's why I'm going to give this one a 9.5 instead of that, full 10 out of 10 and put that on my list. I absolutely plan on continuing on I am reading book 4 of Empire of Silence at the moment. Once I do the 5th audiobook on that one, I think I'll be caught up for now. And then I'll probably, throw in some more of these Dungeon Crawler Carl books throughout the year on times when I can't read, right, when I'm just listening to audiobooks, because it was a ton of fun as an audiobook. One of these days I might buy one of the physical copies and see, what I feel. If it takes away from some of the entertainment factor by not having that narration. I mean, it's really, really well done, the way that it's written. Like, there'll be, he'll pick up an item off of a corpse, and like the heads-up display is just described perfectly, like him putting things into his inventory. You get to see like the different stats that they'll be read. And I just don't know if, physically reading the copy is going to take away a tiny bit of that joy that I had. Jeff Hayes does just such an awesome job of like narrating and being the, that heads up, the AI voice. Carl always sounds pissed off and like it's absurd. He does a great job with Princess Donut, her sounding more like, way more feminine and haughty. And then, you have some other ones like he's got a creature named Mordecai who is kind of like the person. He's an NPC that you're not supposed to interact with in terms of like fighting or anything like that, but he gives advice in safe rooms. There are places where you can go to eat that are safe and sleep as well. And then, you'll have time in between levels and stuff like that. But it's just really well done. And I think that audiobook is what really, made it special for me. Like I said, 9.5 out of 10, wonderful. I absolutely recommend if you want to have a good time and you just want something that's crazy and absurd. But obviously, if you're looking for something serious or with a lot of gravity, then it's not quite going to be the one for you. But go ahead and give this one a shot. I see why so many people have. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful time reading. See you guys out there.